Hey y'all, hey. It's too early in the morning for this. But I just wanted to introduce this next video. This is part 2 to the people pleasing trap that I had did. I wanted to continue on this conversation with episode 2 of the people pleaser. And yeah, so of course, you know, I am trying out the new AI tool that I found. So it actually is pretty good, and they nailed it right on the head. So I don't know, guys. I don't know. This new AI tool I like it. It's very good, actually. You know, and it's got the default voice. Everybody is talking about, oh, people know about the whole, you know, that they know that's an AI. I'm telling you, it's AI, okay? But it's really good. It's really good. You know, and I put together a couple of YouTube videos that was talking about people pleasing. My video, and I think I did 5 videos actually, and they only really talked about 3 of the videos, mine and 2 of the other ones. And I'll link the other videos down in the description if you want to go and take a look at it. But it's really good, y'all. You gotta listen to it. Check this out.
Welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be talking about people pleasing. We've got 3 YouTube videos lined up, and we're going to try and get through all of them today.
It's pretty amazing how each of these YouTubers, with their very different approaches, all kind of converge on this common theme of people pleasing and that struggle.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of the YouTubers, we're going to hear from Liz, who calls herself an extreme people pleaser. She's got a really powerful story. We're going to be talking about Shonda, who calls people pleasing a trap. And then there's Julian, who leads this seminar where he really pushes people to drop the act and be real.
Julian's got a pretty interesting take. He ties people pleasing to anxiety.
Yeah, that's something we're definitely going to want to unpack a little bit later on in the deep dive. But, you know, Liz's story is a really powerful place to start. She talks about being bullied pretty relentlessly throughout her childhood.
And it really went beyond just teasing. Liz describes physical abuse and constant pressure to, do whatever it took to be liked.
Yeah. She talks about this one incident where some boys that were bullying her got another child to punch her in the face. And even after this, she didn't tell her parents.
Really highlights the extent of that people-pleasing tendency. Just heartbreaking.
Yeah, and she was already dealing with abuse at home. She felt like she couldn't add to the drama. So it's like, when does kindness become self-betrayal? And thankfully, Liz's sister comes into the picture, and she kind of becomes the catalyst for change in her life. Liz's sister actually found out about the bullying from an old classmate, and she confronted Liz about not telling her.
I mean, that must have been such a pivotal moment for her.
Yeah, it was. It was like this wake-up call. And Liz finally sought therapy, which she credits with helping her to understand that people-pleasing was not her true self. And it gave her some hope that she could rewrite these deeply ingrained patterns.
It's interesting because Shonda also talks about this rewriting patterns sort of thing, and she frames people-pleasing as this trap that we all fall into, or constantly trying to please our parents, our employers, everyone.
And she calls out this false dichotomy that we're often presented with this idea that you're either selfish or you're a people pleaser.
Right. Like there's no middle ground.
Yeah, like there's no in between.
So you have to pick one or the other. But actually, she argues that that's damaging. And speaking from her own experience, she says that she's lost friends and family members because of people pleasing.
It's so interesting, her approach to kind of getting out of this trap, because she actually brings in ChatGPT to offer advice. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not.
She calls him Chad. She's got ChatGPT and she calls him Chad. And she's like, Chad, how do I get out of this people-pleasing trap? I just thought it was such a clever way to kind of use AI and maybe get a fresh perspective on personal growth.
I can't wait to hear what Chad has to say.
Yeah. But before we get into that, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Julian. He tackles people-pleasing very directly in this seminar, pushing people to confront what he calls their fake fronts.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from making people uncomfortable. He actually tells them to drop the act and be real.
Yeah.
He even goes as far to say that the day you're liked by everyone is the day you're the most fake person alive.
Wow.
Which is a pretty big statement.
Yeah. Makes you think.
It does.
And he says that authenticity can be shocking and it might even repel some people. But ultimately, it's more fulfilling than living in what he calls a golden prison of trying to please everyone.
I love that phrase, that golden prison idea.
And one of the participants in Julian's seminar, Manu, he really brings this point home. He admits to feeling nervous and afraid that if he shows his true self, people will think that he's stupid.
Yeah.
So, you've got Liz, who doesn't fit in, and she feels like she's the weird one out. And then you've got Manu, who's afraid to show his true self because he thinks people will judge him.
Makes me think, is that really what people-pleasing is all about? Just this disconnect from our authentic selves.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's why it leads to anxiety, which Julian brought up. Maybe it's that pressure of constantly performing and trying to be someone you're not.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what does Chad have to say about escaping this people-pleasing trap?
Well, some of it was spot on, actually, like learning to say no.
Yeah, it seems like both Liz and Shonda really emphasized that.
Yeah, like Liz talks about how when somebody asks her to do something, even if she doesn't want to do it, she goes into this like trance mode.
Wow.
And she thinks it's rooted in her childhood and, not wanting to get in trouble.
It sounds like her nervous system is just wired for avoiding conflict.
Totally. And then, Shonda talks about spending years as a yes woman, always putting others first, but she realized it just wasn't sustainable.
And they both talk about, saying no without over-explaining.
Yeah.
Just setting that boundary.
Yeah. And Shonda also talks about protecting our time and energy.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Setting boundaries. Just not letting people take advantage.
Do you think that's tied to self-worth at all?
That's a good question. And Shonda would probably say yes. She says it's not selfish to prioritize your own needs. She says it's essential.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Now, I think it's time to bring in Tam Carr.
Okay.
Because she talks about self-validation.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by her perspective. She really ties it back to self-love.
Yeah. She actually suggests a male detox to break free from seeking validation from men.
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with.
She says that men's tastes are very questionable, and I'm paraphrasing there, but that's essentially what she says. And she's like, why are we letting that be the foundation of our self-worth?
Yeah.
So she's like, put yourself on a pedestal, affirm your own worth, and affirm your own beauty.
I love how direct she is.
Yeah. And she talks about how she used to water down her personality. She would bend over backwards. But she realized it only took her further away from her true self.
Right. And it makes me think back to that golden prison idea.
Yeah.
Are we trapping ourselves by trying to please everyone?
Totally.
Yeah.
And Tam also talks about the importance of having high standards, not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships as well.
That's huge, the people we surround ourselves with.
Yeah. And she's like, stop giving a beep.
Love it.
Yeah. She's like, stop caring so much about what other people think.
Focus on what matters.
And she says everything is temporary. One person's disapproval is just a blip on the radar.
So true.
And she says to focus on your personal growth, pursue your passions.
Because when we're engaged with what lights us up,
We're not seeking it externally.
yeah. And she normalizes rejection,
Yeah.
which is interesting. She says, it's actually good that not everyone likes us.
I never thought of it that way.
Keeps the energy vampires away, right?
Later. Okay.
Like filtering out the noise.
And then she brings up this concept of self-schema,
Okay.
which is essentially how we define ourselves, our self-image.
Gotcha.
And she says to build a positive self-schema by identifying your favorite parts about yourself and then challenging the negative beliefs that you might be holding on to.
Reframing that narrative.
And she gives this great example. You've got two women who both believe they're unattractive. One of them lets that belief run her whole life. The other decides to challenge that belief. So she experiments with her appearance, does a photo shoot, and she ends up seeing herself in a whole new light.
It really shows how much power we have to shape our self-perception.
Yeah. And, she talks about becoming your own source of validation.
Which ultimately, I think it all comes down to that, doesn't it?
It does. And she says, look, you are the only one who truly knows you, inside and out.
So we're the only ones who can accurately validate ourselves.
Exactly. And she talks about emotional validation, especially when you're going through something, instead of running to somebody else for validation, she says to journal, record a video, to process your emotions.
Yeah. Be your own best friend in those moments.
And she gives examples of what to say, I see you, I accept you, it makes sense why you're upset, you're not overreacting.
Yeah, that's really good.
And then finally, she says to see yourself as you are now,
Okay.
not through the lens of your past mistakes, not through the lens of your insecurities. She says, wake up every morning like it's the first day of your life.
It's such a powerful reframing.
It really is.
It's like hitting the reset button.
It is. So what does all of this tell us?
Well, I think the common thread that runs through all three of these YouTubers is that people-pleasing stems from this lack of self-love.
Yeah. And that when we learn to validate ourselves and prioritize our needs, we can break free.
Yeah, recognize our worth and embrace our authenticity.
Which brings us back to Julian's statement. The day you're liked by everyone is the day you're the most fake person alive.
It is a bold statement, but it makes you think.
It does. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to be exploring what it actually looks like to shed those fake fronts.
And unpack that connection between people-pleasing and anxiety.
Yes. Okay, so we've talked about the roots of people-pleasing. We've heard some pretty compelling arguments for embracing authenticity. But what does it actually look like to, break free from this pattern, to shed those fake fronts that Julian's always talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. And I think it starts with self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like identifying the masks we wear and understanding why we wear them. Who are we trying to please? Is it our parents, our boss, societal expectations?
It's almost like uncovering the subconscious scripts that are running the show.
Yeah, exactly. And then once we understand that, we can start to challenge those patterns.
Yeah.
And that might involve having some uncomfortable conversations, setting boundaries, communicating our needs more assertively.
This makes me think about what Shonda said about that false dichotomy of being selfish versus being a people pleaser.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like we're afraid that if we assert our needs, then we're automatically like a bad person.
It's a common fear.
Yeah.
But what if true kindness actually comes from a place of wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
and self-acceptance instead of a need for approval?
It's a good point. So it's not about being less kind. It's about being more authentically ourselves.
Exactly.
But that can feel scary. Like, what about those fears that Manu expressed in Julian's seminar?
Right.
That fear of being seen as stupid or unworthy if we show our true selves.
Yeah, those fears are definitely understandable. We've been conditioned to believe that our true selves aren't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But what if that's actually what's holding us back from experiencing true connection?
Right. And it goes back to what Tam was talking about with self-validation.
Exactly.
If we're constantly looking for validation from external sources, it's probably because we haven't fully accepted ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's where the work begins, right?
Yeah.
Building a positive self-schema like Tam suggests. Recognizing our strengths, challenging those negative beliefs, offering ourselves the same kindness and compassion that we would offer to a loved one.
Yeah, it's like becoming our own best friend.
Our own cheerleader.
Exactly.
And, it's important to remember that it's a journey. It's not like we just wake up one day and we're completely self-validated and we never people please again.
Definitely. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be times when we doubt ourselves.
Absolutely. But the more we practice, the more natural it will become.
And the more we'll attract people who genuinely resonate with who we are.
And going back to what Tam said, it's good that not everyone likes us.
Right?
It really does make space for those deeper connections with the people that do.
It filters out the noise.
Okay, so let's circle back to what Julian said about people-pleasing and anxiety. Why do you think those two things are so connected?
Well, I think people-pleasing creates this tension inside of us. Because we're essentially living a double life. We're presenting this version of ourselves that we think is acceptable while hiding our true thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, no wonder it leads to anxiety. We're constantly worried about being found out.
Exactly. But imagine the freedom that comes from just dropping the act.
Right. just being ourselves, even if it means not being liked by everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's powerful. So, what do you think a world would look like if everyone felt safe to be their authentic selves?
Well, I think it'd be a world with a lot more compassion and understanding, where we wouldn't be so quick to judge or criticize
That's beautiful.
because we would all just recognize that everyone's on their own unique journey.
Yeah. And what if each of us could contribute to creating that world,
Absolutely.
starting with ourselves?
By shedding our own fake fronts,
Yeah.
giving other people permission to do the same.
So, to wrap up this deep dive into people pleasing, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. What if the key to overcoming people pleasing isn't about being less kind or less helpful, but about being more authentically ourselves?
What if true kindness comes from self-love and not a need for approval?
And what if, by letting go of that need to please everyone, we actually unlock a deeper capacity for connection?
I think it's something worth thinking about.
It is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring.
Dreams. I'm learning what my freedom means. I'll set